Shirley here with Sirius Taurus Moon. We have a midheaven 29 degrees Virgo. Mercury at 5 degrees Sagittarius retrograde, separating from a conjunction to Mars, and Moon at 3 degrees Virgo. Now, the ascendant is ruled by Jupiter at 15 degrees Sagittarius, Jupiter retrograde, and the Sun is 21 degrees Scorpio. So, Chiron moving through Aries is a wound around sovereignty. And there are a couple of things that arrive. First of all, Chiron through Aries is probably our last chance before the Neptune ingress to correct the wrongs around sovereignty in spirit and in matter, business, real estate, bloodlines, and make place for the new. Because anything that is a wound around sovereignty has to go. Okay, relationships, business deals, nations, even borders. That's, if you think about Chiron, has been since around 2017-18. It ingressed into Aries quite as Uranus kind of ingressed into Taurus, kind of the year later or something around that time. And so this is where, and I remember actually Raquel Welch. I remember her broadcasting before Chiron ingress into Aries, talking about how Chiron Aries can make people feel left to their own devices, because wherever Aries at is where we have to self-sustain. And Chiron going to Aries was both us kind of being left to our devices in the sense that we have to take care of ourselves in regarding to that house, but also Chiron is where we reconnect with our embodiment, and we learned what is important to identity and sovereignty and how sexual energy connects with that. And this is where we get all the teachings of women. In the beginning, it was mainly colored women, okay, black women, BIPOC. Okay, Chiron in Mars sign is names, so I did it. Black women, people of color, and then I used a very colonialist term. But those women really knew about this phenomena of men being warlocks. So that was really where we got the information from people that dealt with that before, on how, and now they're leading the discourse during, the spiritual warfare, where everybody's like, what's that dumb fucker? It's like, oh, we've been dealing with warlocks since blah, 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 blah. Here's what you have to do. And yeah, and this is where everything that is impediment on one's sovereignty, identity, the I am, is basically being removed. So much so that we talk about the wound around sovereignty and identity of the people that went through cloning. And think about Mars's bloodline and how that has affected them having more susceptibility to being mind controlled. The wounds of the military people that suffered being targeted individuals. Okay, it's a Mars sign. Uranus in Taurus is all the feminist stuff, but Chiron Aries is simply a Mars sign. So it's an I am sign regarding if that I am is a man or a woman. Now Chiron is going to move on to Taurus later this year. And Chiron in the last degrees of Aries is basically touching on the topic of women as well, because it's a Venus decan of Aries. Okay? And the Threads of Fate podcast talked about the third decan of Aries as the conjoining of something that is benefic and malefic. So it's a new initiation that can be around a connection, a union, or value, or even women or womenpreneurs, the lady bosses, and so on. However, there can also be a Martian aspect. So it can be somebody launches a project, but it's not being so well received. For me, it's my second house, and several times where I purchased from women businesses, suddenly there would be a wound around the purchase, and that would be like, but wait a second, like I'm honoring the business and giving credit to the person. I'm putting my money into their business. Why do all these things come up? Well, Chiron one by one, whether it would be the MK often, whether it would be moon compatibility, whether it will be okay, it goes through the elimination process. Mars, that's what Mars is doing. Mars is severing ties. What is the I am? Okay, and Mars is, think about it, when we buy this house, we basically choose this house. All the other houses, at that point, where we have that much money to buy this house, we buy this house first, which is Aries, okay? This first, which eliminates all the other options for the time being. And now imagine the challenge where, let's say I would buy a talisman from one house, and then buy another talisman from another house, and oh wait, I noticed that for me they work better together. Now those are competing houses. They may have had a quarrel because that person plagiarized from that person and then had to fix it, and then okay, and I was trying to create the union, Venus, where hey, that person is coming from that continent and that from that continent. So I was trying to bridge the cultural differences and values that could cause, and in that case I was on the wrong because they had incompatible moon nakshatras that created friction and conflict, and there was an issue of plagiarism as well. So maybe there was, maybe like I'm not going to, okay, but or another person says, for example, that they really hate when people start talking about medicine and so and so and so, or blame people for their problems or start scaring people. But the other person made a fertility talisman when they are going to have a Saturn in their fifth house, so they were understanding that they are about to get pregnant, and it was also the time, but they were afraid to lose the baby. And okay, so you see how that can be trying to create a union, Venus, and bridge through conflict. And Chiron is a wound around that. Not all conflicts are meant to be bridged. And at the same time, not all conflicts are meant to be preserved. So this is kind of the last decan of Aries, where after that decan, Chiron will go into Taurus and we'll hear all the wounds around the sisterhood. Boys, prepare your popcorn, you're about to be entertained. And so one of the things that I remember today, I have the luminaries in Mercury decan and Venus in Mercury decan and Mercury ruling over the 4th and 7th. And one of the things that my mother told me when I was young a couple of times was, your hands are not working hands. Your hands are not fit to work. And I'm like, why on earth would somebody emphasize on that? And this led me to, and of course, I mean, before my mother had me, she painted and she created, there were glass paintings on all of the walls. And then I was born. So, of course, she had a daughter with luminaries in Mercury Decan, with Mercury in Aries, which is creating something new, handcrafted. And that's not working hands, but not only that, I had an issue with coordination. It's like something about that was not meant for laborious task. It was not meant for industrial job. And it was meant to create, but not for industrial job. And that's obvious. I mean, she would have gotten all the omens from the way that she painted the entire walls with glass paintings. And then I was born. Then she did renovations and all the glass paintings had to go, and because she didn't, like, I don't know. But the thing is that it was pretty obvious that this person is birthing, and she also has a Taurus 5th house. And I'm Sun Taurus and Venus Taurus. Quite obvious she's going to be birthing a child that's going to be very creative and artistic and would have a lot of skills with their hands, but those are not working hands for any meticulous job, because that person wasn't meant to do anything that would take them away from their path of building and creating something that is efficiently constructed. Even if I think about digging the half moons, okay? It's not industrious. In fact, doing that industrious would harm not only my hands, but also the spirit and the matter of the remineralization and the entire divination of this project. That's what I'm getting. Why divination? I don't know. Ooh, it's supposed to remove toxicity. And that is on the spirit and matter. It's supposed to remove toxicity of religion, of spirituality, of costumes and habits, and thus in the soil, because those governed the policies that corrupted the soil. So going back to Chiron in Aries, everything that is an impediment on the individual rights and sense of identity, individual rights and sense of identity, is going to connect with colonialism o'clock very soon, is being removed. That being said, the traditional family, the people, the tribe, the nation, anything tradition that is impediment on the individual. Now, the first 3 years of Neptune, we're not going to feel that so much, because that would be the time where there would be an attempt to instill something, some barrier on the individual on a collective level. That being said, what Neptune is doing in Aries is the flood to all the traditions that are an impediment on the individual. What was Neptune doing in Pisces? Neptune ingressed 2012 to Pisces. So this is a good time to reflect since 2012. I'm not going to talk about the Rolodex right now. People hear Neptune in Pisces, they Neptune ingressed into Pisces. Everybody learned to connect with manifestation and to manifest wealth, to manifest healing, to tend to their psychiatric cuckoo-ness, to go off the drugs of the psychiatric cuckoo-ness, and okay, energy work, like all the things Pisces. How fish are actually important to the nervous system health, okay? Nervous system Aquarius. Next, how do we balance our nervous system after all, with Neptune that accentuated on, oh, you need to take your omega-3. Okay, well, herring. Ocean fish. But it also removed anything that is of Pisces nature that pollutes the preconception waters or the oceans. We during this time we began to seriously move to solar energy, and even hydro energy. People began to manifest, and then Saturn into Pisces, they began to remove the curses on their manifestations. So, while Neptune going through Pisces culminated in people having to stand sovereign in the face of spiritual warfare, which will continue to Aries, being a time where people, by surrendering how they express their I am, finding out miraculous ways of reconnecting with their sense of self and identity and their I am. Okay, for example, Aries is ability. So let's say, yes, somebody, I don't know, had an accident, Mars, and they lost their ability to drive for a while. To begin with, they wanted to drive so that they will have independence. And then they can't really drive, so they have to find new ways to express their own independence. And then they can come up with another skill that they haven't developed, and now they have more time to develop as they, or even the fact that they're being maybe dependent on other people. Although Aries is what we do for ourselves, they may develop a technology that assists them to do what they came to do. Okay, for example, one famous example of a person that developed a technology was the scientist that was sitting on a wheelchair, and he had something like CP, and he developed basically the ability to read his own brainwaves and to give commands to the technology, whereas to move his chair and so on. And so he maintained his reliance on himself and independence by innovation and technology. Today it's being used for surveillance and all types of stuff. But but here's the thing. With Pisces, we learned about the facet of manifestation, the astral realm, and so on and so forth. And then we began to remove that which was preventing us from accessing those realms. Meaning Aries, we're going to set our own I am in those realms as well. So Chiron being the last major transit in Aries before Neptune, because Neptune arrives with Saturn. And with Neptune is the fluid. Okay, we see that the structures, including housing, that was built on rituals that prevented people from being individual, independent, and so on, is being flooded. Unfortunately, also with a certain, certain type of elderly people or homeless people, okay, um, there is genuine grief, okay, it's not, I remember one of the 10 astrology talked about when her father died and how, as much as she loved her father, there was something where, and however much he was willing to help her with her business and so on, she couldn't really express herself until after his death. And it was not that he intended bad or nothing. And that can create, with Neptune, can also be a feeling of shame for certain people. Okay, that they can't really express themselves or they can't really be themselves. And those things are things that they are related to. The motherland, the tradition, the father, the siblings, the family business, the this, the that. And this is where the great grief washes away the pain, but also washes away the impediment on individual sovereignty. Chiron ingressed to Aries about 2017, 18, somewhere around. Let's see, Chiron in Aries. Yeah, but do we have the dates? 2018. And the last move would be until 2020, 27, until 2027. The first touch of Chiron ingress in Taurus we're going to have already in 2026. And 2018, that was a time that we were really left to our own devices. I discovered that my psychologist was programmed, okay, tortured, um, and that torture and the programming was to try to assassinate or kidnap me or whatever. And I was the patient, okay, so uh, that's one scary thing for when we come to nourish our inner child and have relational psychotherapy, and boom. And so Chiron going over my Mercury was me leaving an apartment that was the ritual abuse were done to harm my ability to have my own identity. Even they wanted to actually harm my ability to have and I am, okay? They wanted to psychiatrically harm me. Okay, they need to create deeds so people will be mind controlled. Now, this is not a sub story because entire humanity has been through that. And Chiron is kind of our last chance to, by embodiment, reconnect with our I am, or connect with our I am, and sever ties with that which doesn't support it. When Neptune arises, first of all, Saturn is going to put that to the test in some way. When Saturn ingressed into Aries, I remember I was aligning my toes. There was a lot of tedious. Saturn is duration and time. Mars is work. Okay, is exercise, and I was exercising, aligning my toes, and I could barely walk because every step had to be realigned. And I noticed the how the surveillance is trying to limit the sovereignty of people, but also create a certain connection between people. And really, the atmosphere was being felt of something that tries to limit or set boundaries to the sovereignty, which only forges a deeper sense of sovereignty and individuality. There were really attempts on, for me, the ruler of the 70s there, so attempts on, you know, even trying to limit basically movement or, okay, certain people stalking or, all these weird things. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. Now, of course, because it's an impediment on individual sovereignty, it creates the necessary friction to outthrow, and Saturn is from the root, those systems on a global scale. That's the Saturn Neptune, to be very honest. Something tries to put a limitation on the I am, and it stirs up a friction, and that friction is removing from the core or the foundations of anything that relied on impediment on the sovereignty in spirit and in matter, which is also life energy. It's also going to be a racial war. Saturn rules melanin people, and Aries rules bloodline. And I am, but it's ruled by Mars, and Mars is the younger people. Saturn is the more traditional people. Um, Black people are not going to have easy time with Saturn in Aries, particularly not in the army. this time where now the more they remove, and this is why I really love what happened in Somalia, where the government was going to remove child weddings, and that exposed the imams. The more they remove that, while Chiron is in Aries and Neptune, Saturn still aren't, the easier it will be for Somalia to maintain its sovereignty through colonialism o'clock. Now think about the habits of Islam in the Middle East. Genitalia mutilation, also for the girls. The more they abolish this practice, the less they are susceptible to be invaded by the West. The West is eyeing New Egypt. What is New Egypt? New Egypt is Old Egypt, but occupied by United States. Okay, I got colleagues in Oregon. They create in Tema Mundi talismans with egg creation stories, and I saw lotus flowers infused into the omens. Now I'm like, oh, usually we see the planet Earth, the Earth, and so on. Now we see egg shape and lotus. It's like, okay, somebody go in Egypt. Somebody go into the Nile. That somebody is the US government with all its surveillance. So I saw things regarding that since Chiron ingressed into Aries, to be very honest. I was working with the Moldavite, and I saw about Egyptians, magic, and so on. And again, there was the attempt to prevent people from dabbling into the occult. It's useless because people are going to dabble into the occult, and the more they can share information with one another, the more they can actually maintain their sovereignty within that. And the less they have to spread rumors about one another, because the more they can divine on themselves and see what's actually happening. Those businesses that work with Ebke often or Warlockism would go through the backlash that's necessary for them to grow. And now we're going to become more aware culturally, religiously, traditionally, what are impediments on our sovereignty and sense of individuality. Anything that goes through Aries is desire to one thing and one thing only: forge an I am and maintain it. An individual right. Doesn't work with slavery, doesn't work with warlockism, doesn't work with succubus, incubus, doesn't work with child marriage, which are to siphon the energy of children, doesn't work with ritual abuse. Doesn't work with siphoning energy. definitely doesn't work with rape. Who is the god associated most with Aries? Ares, god of war. What did Ares do? Well, a lot of feminists love Ares because he was the only god that not only did not rape, but killed the rapists. Which reminds us that war is to kill the rapists. And why do we kill the rapists? Whether it's by pattern or no longer be, okay, people being no longer rapey, okay, um, or by the people themselves. If they insist to be rapey, then they are killed. And this is because rape is violation of sovereignty, is violation of identity, is violation of the I am. This is why do all personality cults, energy siphoning cults, always have an element of sex cults, even the more Puritan they are, or child marriages and so on and so forth, because they need to violate an identity and a sovereignty and an I am to siphon the energy. And to harvest on souls. What people forget about colonialism o'clock is that it is also erasing those type of cultures and traditions from the planet. The colonies that the colonies that were successful were the colonies that basically brought more human rights than they took. Okay? But here's the thing. People think that they just have to be a better handler. No. Light had a strong channeling about that. It was not a mundane channeling, but it translates to mundane energy as because the more limitation they're going to put, particularly with Neptune. Neptune is that which is missing sometimes. And when something is missing, we find out how important it is, and then we give it even more importance, and we want to make sure that that's not lost. Or if something is missing, suddenly we are finding relief that was unexpected underneath the grief. And then there can also be shame because that which was supposed to invoke only grief also invoked relief, and that is yes, and that is something that people have to live with sometimes. Now, it's important to understand, yes, traditional families, people that are traditional in a way that don't allow a person to be who he or she is, are probably not going to survive Neptune in Aries. Saturn in Aries simply means new traditions. Now, here is the thing. People find out more facets to the I am, the identity, and the sovereignty, and they basically ask for more, not less. When I was in between houses, I did not get out of homelessness by asking for less, but by asking for more. Why did moving out of the village to the city worked? Because in the city there were street lights and women could travel, work, make money, and spend money and have more freedoms than they had in the village. When they tried to make a human trafficking hub out of the city, then women moved off grid. Off grid. When they tried to bring women back to the city, so they made a revolution in the city. They began to sing in synagogues, right where the men are. They began to tarnish every single thing. Also, the secular people. There were demonstrations in Bnei Brak of secular people, huge fights, just in Israel. And Israel has fourth house Capricorn. These are traditional people. When they try to instill in Arad something like women sitting in the back of the bus, men in the front, all the women came to the front. God, oh, they were sitting also in the seats of the disability. And then there became to be more women drivers. Which brings me to the point where Aries is in our chart. The I am, the individual, is important. Aries, 10th house, 6th house, 3rd house, and 2nd house and 8th house emphasize the self-sustaining. It means that the person is their own boss, both in terms of income, spending, skill. Okay, I have 2nd house Aries. There was an element of being self-taught. Even if I would learn from courses, even when I went to university. Okay, I was in politics and governance, and my thesis was completely comprised of my self-studies. Those that try to use mimicry, mockery, to lower the frequency so that it wouldn't be an I am, this is not their prettiest time. And I mean, those can be societies. Those can be entire societies, global societies even. Now, the more people are attached to the old ways, the more they're going to look like these Islamic imams in Somalia that all they said is that they cannot rape girls anymore, young girls. And they went, but we go by Islam, we go by Islam. What is this imam? What about that imam? We go by Islam. Tell me, how are you going to respect a person when they whine and cry about not being able to rape a child? Those were the people that were supposed to be um, the people that that are, think about respect your elders, and then you see an imam crying about not being able to rape a 12 years old. Now, PC has left the arena. This is the time where no culture can sustain the respect my culture, respect our traditions, respect our this. It's not going to happen. You burn alive women when their husbands die with the body of the husband. Respect your what? And all cultures have to look into themselves, because they cannot be respected without abolishing those practices. And in Neptune Aries, they will not. Those, okay? If invasion prevented and stopped burning women with their husbands, then there would be colonialism. As simple as that. Aries is the I am, is the individual. Everything in Aries, the I am take precedence over the family, the lineage. And the more the lineage insists, the more they're going to look like these Somali Muslim men that whine about the government outlawing pedophilia in Somalia. In fact, the most effective removal of apartheid by Nelson Mandela was about both breaking from the traditions of the original monarchy and integrating what was coming from the West that was actually benefic. Nelson Mandela wasn't in prison just because of the colonizers. He was in prison because of the apartheid that existed prior to the colonizing, and he was bringing a removal of not only the apartheid of the white regime, but the racial apartheid and bloodline apartheid that pre-existed colonialism. In the books of prophecies of the Chinese prophets, they predict that eventually that there would be judgment day, and that eventually all bloodlines and races would be able to live harmoniously. Now here's the thing about bloodline. Blood is Mars. Lineage is Saturn. Saturn Mars is competition between the bloodlines. New bloodlines, we're probably going to discover some historical, they come from this lineage, they come from that lineage. But all of the lineage, and this is something that can be quite scary, entire lineages can be washed away. Okay? Entire family names, but here is not family names, is dynasties. We saw it with the Mings. Entire dynasties can be washed away, um, and there's competition. To ensure sustainability, the dynasty has to ensure individual sovereignty within the dynasty and the lineage, and outside. Aries is a competition, and that which respects and honors sovereignty the most wins. Now to Sun. Wherever we have the Sun in the natal chart, this is where we are leaders. It's kind of like this is our kingdom. Let's say Sun in the third house or in the sixth house um, usually makes for people that um, they need to have things done. Let's say if third house is the daily course, these are the people who are the leaders of doing the course the way that expresses their authentic self, and they can't be expected to do the course, and they need to be appreciated by the people associated with that house if they are doing course for others. Okay, Sun in the third house, Sun in the sixth house, same but with being an employee. Sun in the third house, ruling over sixth house. These are Pisces ascendants. Can mean one is Pisces ascendants, Taurus Sun. Okay, ruling over the sixth house is Pisces ascendant, and that would be Taurus Suns. With Pisces ascendants, they need to be. They are their own business. They are their own employee, and they can't. That business can't be expected to the rules and regulations on businesses. Okay, it has to be feasible for them to run a business as they would do a Taurian thing. Okay, so it needs to be a business that is that it is restful to run, but it also has to express their authentic self. Sun in the 10th house or 10th house Leo. The person is their own boss. In that case, the person can be inspired by a leader in their own field, and they can just be in a lineage, or if the Sun is well aspected, they can actually be a person that learns from authority and becomes an authority. Okay? Now, wherever Aries is, we are going to have our own way. Whatever is in Aries has one's own individual way about that particular thing. It's going to arrive very early. It's not compatible with Saturnian people. Okay, Saturnian people expect for people to have to learn their way and then only mature into their own way after learning the way of the patron or the mentor and so on. I'm not saying that's completely impossible with Aries, but it's not a Saturn. Okay, they're going to look into what the other person does and have their own way of doing that. And it might not even be conscious. Okay, it's just so I have Mercury in Aries, so anything, whether it's something I do with my hands, has to be done my way. And it's not on purpose. It's my original creative passion that's dependent on that. So I wouldn't feel like, oh, I need to do it my way. No, I would have like, oh, I have an idea, boom, and I dream with action. And it's not compatible for those that seek somebody to do something in a particular way, be it anything, okay, any type of skill, particularly is income. No, there's a reason I couldn't keep a job. Even when I was singing, I was told by a choir manager, said, no, you're a solo artist. And I was, and he was saying that, no, 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 you're a solo artist. Because I was like, I like to sing, I practice so much about singing. Why don't I get accepted to the choir? Because I'm a solo artist. Okay, it doesn't mean that I cannot do a duet or something like that, but my expression will have to be adapted to. And when that's not possible, then I cannot be there. This is also why I'm not so compatible with being a tenant. And here's the thing. I don't plan on being like a realtor, real estate, a this or that or that. It's like necessity is the mother of invention. It's like it's obvious to me that I have my own I am, and if people expect, when people buy, let's say, a house for investment, and they expect everything to be kept in their own thing or their own this or their own that, or it's kind of like the tenant has to accommodate to what the landlord sees as the vision for the place. That, like, I'm not of that. And those that have too many problems with me innovating around the house will have to find a way that people like me will have their own way in their own house. Like, for example, I'm not the child that a parent would have to say, oh, when you will grow up, you will do that in your own house. I'm like, okay, fine. Let's go look for housing. As you can infer or by induction, and you would probably not be wrong, I'm not so compatible for either capitalist or communist society. Now, wherever Aries is in someone's chart, for example, my mother has Aries in the fourth house. The minute she popped up out of her mother's belly, she was independent. She would immediately go to rent her own apartment, have her own house, own her own house. Then it's my house, it's my rules, and I'm like, okay, I need housing. I need. Aries 10th house. People could have also one of the parents that says it's my house, it's my rules, and so on and so forth. Then, when they are in their career, Aries 10th house will have a lot of problem with any branding deals. So Aries 10th house would be Cancer ascendants. Why? Because the branding needs to be their own way. They